Hello and welcome to the Climate Resilience Podcast, brought to you by JBA Consulting. I'm Phil Emonson, and in this podcast series, we unpick some of the complexities, challenges and opportunities on the topic of climate resilience with some inspirational thought leaders. So welcome to the first podcast of 2025 and Happy New Year to you all. We've got some really great things planned for the podcast this year. I can't say too much at this stage, but keep an eye out on JBA's social media channels for some more information in due course. Now, my guests today are here to talk about the role that social value plays in helping to enhance whole society resilience to climate change. And my guests are Lucy Formoy from JBA and Kat Cornfield from the Environment Agency. So a really warm welcome to you both, and perhaps you could start by introducing yourselves.
Hi, I'm Lucy Formoy and I'm a Principal Sustainability Analyst at JBA, and I'm also the Social Value and Engagement Lead. So I've been with JBA for about 2 years now, and I've spent the last couple of years developing our social value strategy at JBA, both kind of internally on projects. Prior to that, I was a chartered architect and spent years working in the built environment with very much a focus on co-design and creating sustainable places and placemaking. So very much kind of working alongside those local communities, which is what's led me to really to be interested in social value. Over to you, Kat.
Thanks, Lucy. Hello, everyone. I'm Kat Cornfield. I'm Social Equity Senior Advisor in the Environment Agency Sustainable Business team. I've been in the EA for 21 years now in a whole range of roles, but now I focus on social equity, social value and modern slavery. And one of the key parts of my role is sort of refreshing our corporate sustainability strategy and looking at how we can deliver our work equitably. So thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you both with us. And so to start then, perhaps let's have a chat about how the concepts of social value and climate resilience are linked. Who wants to kick us off?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one, Phil, to start off the conversation at least. So I think if we just start by looking at what social value is to get this conversation going. So really social value is this additional value that we're creating above and beyond the sort of inherent nature of what we do day to day. And it's all around creating lasting changes to social, economic and environmental well-being to the people we work with and the communities we serve. So really social value is around a community-centred approach, and it's around working towards a more equitable society. So looking at the concept of this alongside resilience, they're both very much looking to create wider and lasting benefits to society above and beyond the inherent nature of what we're trying to do in our projects. So an example of this is a sort of flood alleviation scheme doesn't maximise social value or resilience just by itself. There may be inherent value and a level of contributing towards that community's resilience within that scheme. But you really need a much more holistic approach to that project to deliver both. For example, working with that local community and assessing what they need. I think that's a really important part of both social value and resilience, is that kind of community-centred bottom-up approach, with a real assessment of what that community needs. So Kat, any more thoughts?
Yeah, well, really, social value aims to not only bring the short-term benefits, but it brings those lasting changes as well. And we know that resilience is also a long-term strategy, don't we? So, and from the Environment Agency's perspective, our climate ambition is to be a nation ready for and resilient to climate change. And delivery of this isn't just about the number of properties we can protect through the work that we do. It's about the schemes and the projects that deliver better and more integrated outcomes. It's about outcomes that allow the whole of society to become more aware of their risk, be able to adapt and have capacity to respond and recover more effectively. And it's about outcomes that seek to enhance social capital, human capital, natural capital, and the resilience of our assets and infrastructure and our systems. So the social value we can deliver on projects can hugely support this through the creation of lasting and wider benefits. And these benefits are rooted in a sense of place, so very much focused on the individual areas and communities that we live in, but also crucially with equity in mind. So one of the most important things to note here is that by ensuring we listen to the needs of all the members of our communities, and particularly those people who have the smallest voices, and by supporting people to release the blockers that will enable them to become more resilient, we can contribute to a more equitable society and generate better outcomes for people and nature. So they're very, very closely linked, I think, resilience and social value.
Yeah, and I think just picking up on your point, Kat, around being rooted in that sense of place, and really kind of, responding to what that community needs. I think it really highlights the importance of getting a good local needs assessment to build a picture of what that community actually needs. So so this would be kind of collecting their things like demographics information, existing social networks, understanding what organizations are operating in that place. And I think when we can really get under the skin of what that what is that community really needs, that's when we can deliver real social value and resilience as well. And I think we can use our social value activities as a tool for increasing resilience if done properly, and if it's what that community needs, and if you're working with those existing networks and groups within that community that you will have highlighted through your local needs assessment.
Yeah, and if we're talking about what the community needs, we know that not everybody is the same, not everybody's equal. We know that the poorest people in society are more affected by the effects of climate change. So if we talk about social equity and a just transition, we should be working with communities and groups who need it the most, and ensure that the whole of society is resilient to climate change. And in our industry, we've got this great opportunity, haven't we, to create a fairer transition to the changing climate and, to the changing net zero goals as well. And in the EA, we've been developing our sustainability strategy with a group of fair transition champions. These are staff volunteers from within our organisation who can share lived experiences and perspectives from a range of their communities. And their insights have really helped us be able to develop a practical understanding of what we can achieve through social value to support resilience within the community. So we really, we can really target some of our social value interventions based on that lived experience from those fair transition champions. So I think that's a really key thing, is ensuring that the communities have their voice and have their say. Have you got anything else to add there? Yeah,
well, I was just about to say on the I just think it really highlights that we need to be considering the whole of society here, and just kind of, it was a really good point that you made, and obviously some really good work that you're doing involving kind of different groups within that exercise. So I think it's just going back to that whole of society theme.
It is, and it's really important to say here that our fair transition champions have, a really big voice within our organisation, and they've been represented on our board. talking to the people in the highest places in the organization about how important it is to be equitable when we're talking about adaptation to climate change, resilience, and really through all of the work that we're doing in the Environment Agency. But it's great that they've really sort of brought the energy to what it means to have a fair transition as well. So I'm really proud of everybody that's been involved in that.
And sounds like an amazing piece of work.
It does, and something that you've both been describing there on a number of occasions is the phrase whole of society, and it's something we've touched on in previous episodes of the podcast on a couple of occasions. And this phrase has been around a couple of years now. It was first used. First time I heard it was in the National Resilience Framework that the government published at the end of 2022, and that talks about how resilience should be a whole society endeavour. And I think what I've been struck by listening to you both is that the effects of climate change will impact different parts of society in different ways. And if we are to build a nation ready for and resilient to climate change, then it isn't a one size fits all in every community. And we need to think about those who are, as you said, Kat, most likely to be impacted in different ways, and who are most vulnerable. And that means tailoring our solutions and our outcomes so that they are better and more integrated, as you said, but also so that we consider that end user, that audience, individually. So is it somebody, for example, or part of a community who is perhaps not digitally enabled? Is it somebody or part of the community for whom English isn't the first language? So there's lots of different aspects and components of the whole of society. And Lucy, you talked about the need to do that local needs assessment and therefore rooting all of our work in that sense of place. So it's a really great way to start the discussion, and thank you both. And so to move it on a little, I'd be really keen then to explore with you some of the practical examples of how social value and climate resilience work together in action.
Yeah, so we've looked at this, Phil, and kind of based it really upon our 4 petals of resilience. I think we can break down the sort of different elements of both social value and resilience into those 4 petals. So if we start by looking at awareness, we can use social value to raise awareness in local communities through working with schools, some of our sort of STEM work, kind of getting in schools and doing lessons, taking the wave tanks along our practical models to build awareness of climate change in a really accessible way. And also, working with the wider community and educating them around climate change. We've done several events where we've been into village halls, and we've taken our physical models are really great tools to get people engaged straight away, and to show them sort of visually the effects of climate change and flooding. So moving on to the next petal of adapting, helping communities adapt to climate change, helping them adapt their behaviour and attitudes towards climate change, but in an accessible way. So an example of this that we've worked on, our landscape team worked on, was a play park that was formed of suds. So this area sort of naturally floods when it rains. It's one of the first areas to flood, and it becomes a little bit of a huge sort of splash puddle for children to play in, and it really shows visually that flooding is going to affect our lives. We are going to have to change the way that we do things. And it brings in that kind of, I guess, playful nature to it as well. Another example around adapting, where we could use social value activities to help communities adapt, is working with schools to produce their climate action plans. So I think all schools by this summer have got to have a climate action plan in place, and I don't know how aware many of them are that this needs to happen, but we can use our social value activities on projects to support schools to become more climate ready and help them produce those climate action plans and get prepared. So moving to the next petal of helping communities respond. So we could do things like working with local charities, supporting local businesses and SMEs to enable a more effective response. So this just might be things like equipping with information and training, getting people to sign up to the flood warning service. And going back to what we were saying before, really working with charities who represent different groups and who might be affected most as well. So making sure that whole of society is being considered, that we're engaging with different groups of people in the most effective way and the most accessible way. So just onto the final petal of resilience, of recovering, helping, enabling communities to recover effectively from the effects of climate change. So can we do things like offer our time or expertise on a contract to assist with recovery? So can we provide effective engagement to communities after events to help them with recovery? I think engagement, talking to those communities, enabling them to understand what's happened so that they can move forward is a huge part of being able to recover. And can we support communities and businesses to think about how they might recover and assist them with developing their own recovery plans? You know, there's going to be a huge need for an awful lot of businesses to think about their plan if they were to be affected by a climate change event. So yeah, offering our time and expertise really to help them. So yeah, Kat, I just wondered if you've got any from your experience, any more examples on any of those.
Yeah, firstly, I love the 4 petals approach. That just so delicate, you know, conjures up this vision of that sort of delicate blend to create the overall thing. Yeah, so I mean, we have to remember as well that not only are we going to get warmer and wetter winters, we're also going to have drier and hotter summers. And, you know, thinking about how we embed social value into project design is going to be really crucial. So as well as that sort of stuff that's over the, you know, on top of the inherent nature of what a project does, actually designing in social value is going to be really crucial. And by that I'm just thinking sort of off the top of my head, and I'm not sure if this has been done yet, but by creating things like heat protective spaces for people that provide benefits and refuge, well, to people and to nature, because, you know, not all of our buildings are going to be equipped with cooling or cool spaces or ways of cooling them. So there could be ways that we could do that. But we also now know, as I said before, that there is a really strong link between flooding and mental health, and also, I guess, heat, stress and mental health as well. So one of the things that we did we've been doing in the Environment Agency is sort of trialing some social prescribing, and it's a really great way to connect people to the environment as well. So the EA and some partners have been working in partnership with a local NHS trust to get some of the projects that we've been working on onto the NHS social prescribing database. And what that has enabled people to do is patients are now able to choose a project that they can get involved with to support their mental health or their physical health. And it also helps them sort of connect with nature. It can reduce loneliness. It can increase skills. It can, you know, help people with, you know, all manner of things that would otherwise be dealt with through medication on the NHS. So that benefit of avoiding the sort of costs of medication and the environmental effects of medication going into watercourses and things is really tangible. So there's some really great things that people are coming up with all the time and coming to me with ideas and saying, how, could we do that? And really, there's no limit on the innovation that people can come up with when it comes to doing social value and social prescribing. We just need to really be bold enough just to say yes to do it. So this is such an interesting, and emerging and developing area of work. I'm just really pleased to be involved with it. And I know you, Lucy, are the same, because we often say how we could talk all day about this.
Absolutely. And I just love that example of social prescribing as well that you've just given, because that is absolutely kind of, what we're talking about here, that taking that holistic approach. You're not just trying to solve one issue here. You've got you've got your mental health benefits within that example, but also the tree cover and making those those shaded spaces for and accessible to all. I just think that was such a lovely example of really kind of thinking about a project much more holistically and addressing so many more issues and having so many more tangible benefits that we probably don't even know about.
This is really interesting to hear, and there's some parallels with what you've both just been describing with some of the work that I've been doing over the last couple of years. I've been looking at how we can give people in our sector the skills and the confidence to change the language choices and the way they describe the work that they do, whereas historically we might have used words like prevent flooding or defend ourselves. Now we have to have the skills and the confidence to be able to talk about resilience and adaptation and understand deeply what that means. And I think actually what you've just been describing there, Kat and Lucy, is the need to have the skills and the confidence to think creatively and innovatively when we're delivering a project. So rather than being focused on the deliverables and the program and then moving on to the next project, actually just taking the time to think, what can we do with this community? What's unique in this community? The 4 JBA petals from our climate resilience framework are a really nice way to hang some of those off, Lucy. And yeah, Kat, the social prescribing with the NHS projects sounds absolutely fantastic. And I'd be keen offline from the podcast to just pick your brains and explore a little bit more about that. And as is often the case, though, unfortunately, with these podcasts, we do have a sort of a time limit, and we move then on to what will be our final discussion topic for the day. And I suppose it's about priority. We have just described that the role of social value is at the forefront of the opportunities that we've got. It's quite new, it's quite fresh. People are thinking about how they can apply social value, and there's some really exciting opportunities ahead of us to enable whole of society resilience to climate change. And so I suppose the question that I'd like to ask you both to finish then is, what do you both see as the priority areas for moving social value forward?
So I'll start us off on this one. I think from my perspective, I think because, as you say, we're using different language now. I think we've always been delivering for communities in various ways, but I think now we're placing more emphasis on it. But what we need to do is we need to sort of build that capacity within our organisation and build the understanding about it, because there's been sort of a big emphasis on making sure we've got the right people doing the right jobs. But what we're now switching to do is saying, well, actually, can we in fact get people on the job ladder, for example, on the career ladder by bringing them onto our contracts? So I've been working on various tenders across our frameworks, and working really closely with our delivery partners to get them up to speed on what looks good, what would be good in terms of social value, what would we like to see happening through the work that they're carrying out for us. So we're doing lots of that capacity building. We've asked some of our delivery partners to submit sustainability plans to us with support, so that we can sort of help everybody understand, so that we're all on the same wavelength really when it comes to delivering social value. And also just to sort of because lots of our framework delivery partners are in local communities, they have that really unique position to be able to tell us as well, what they're doing to support their communities. They might be doing things like supporting a local football team, for example, and that's social value, because that football team wouldn't be there if they didn't have all the right kit and they weren't able to, travel to different places. So these things mean a lot to communities. So I think my key one is capacity building, getting everybody understanding what we mean by social value.
Yeah, I think that is really key, Kat. And I think another sort of key sort of takeaway for me is around raising awareness and education within local communities. I think it's really important to raise awareness around climate change, because it's going to enable people to understand it more and enable them to adapt and effectively respond when these events do happen. So one way that we can do this is quite an easy way, is working with schools and colleges and universities, engaging with education. So I know at JBA we've got quite a big STEM network, and we take our physical models out. We've got our wave tank and our sandbox, and lots of sort of fun interactive elements to really bring it to life, and to really give people that sort of visual picture of climate change, the effects of flooding. Another thing that I've already mentioned is around the sort of helping with climate action plans for schools. And I think something else that I know you're really interested in, Phil, as well, is working with the arts. How can we raise awareness around climate change through different means, through creative means, so that we are so that we're engaging with as many members of the community as possible. And I think one of those ways is working through the arts. And I know at JBA we've done an awful lot of projects around kind of engaging with different artists to try and work towards educating and raising awareness within communities around climate change.
Yeah, and I think as probably our last point would be around, empowering communities themselves. So, being able to, we're in another unique position to be able to offer potentially people skills training, and tools. And as you were saying before about, people who might not be computer literate, we've all got computer literacy skills that we could potentially share. So it's about, also being able to share our time as well. And we can do that through things like we have outcome days, which are sort of volunteering days, and just giving people the ideas that they can take out to their communities would be really helpful as well, so that we can just empower the communities to sort of be able to protect themselves and be resilient in the future.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, Kat, that we've got a couple of examples of where we've done that in quite a kind of very simple but effective way. So, for example, our PFR projects, we do an awful lot of property flood resilience schemes, and I know on several of those schemes we have the opportunity to talk to residents. We're going around people's houses, and we're often talking to an awful lot of people within that local community, and just being able to hand out a little bit of additional information. So while you're doing that visit, go and take an information booklet around kind of offering a little bit of information around the sort of kind of the flood warning service, or a little bit of information about how to better prepare yourself for an event. So I think there's some really simple ways that we can do that as well.
Thank you both. And Kat, I'm really glad that you started with your top priority being around building capacity. I did a conference presentation before Christmas where I spoke about there being a case for and a need for change in our sector, and we are starting to see change as we shift our outlook and our perceptions, and as we seek to build societal resilience to climate change. And I posed the question there: is your team or organisation preparing and planning for the capacity and the new types of integrated skills that we will all need as we seek to build resilience? So it was really interesting to hear your thoughts on that as well. Look, it's been a great conversation today. Thank you both for taking part and joining us on the podcast. And I think what we've sort of taken away from it is that social value is this additional value that we create over and above what we do traditionally on a project, but ultimately it is about creating that lasting change in the communities that we serve and that we work in, and creating a more equitable society. And if we are truly invested in creating a nation ready for and resilient to climate change and delivering that whole society resilience, then social value has a really important part to play, and it goes hand in hand with those activities to build resilience. So thank you both. It's been fantastic. So we have reached the end of our time today. As always, if you've enjoyed listening, then please do hit the subscribe button so that you're ready for the next episode in a few weeks' time. Till then, thanks for joining us. I'm Phil Emonson, and you've been listening to the Climate Resilience Podcast, brought to you by JBA Consulting.